Disclaimer, I shall be discussing mental health in this video. Any and all discussion of mental health is purely speculation on my part and should be taken with a grain of salt. I am a teenager, not a mental health professional. What's up? It's me, TSC Tom, and welcome back to Lele Pons is a figure who needs no introduction.
It is the largest man-made source of greenhouse gases.
Industry! Clouds!
If you don't know who Lele Pons is, then how's that rock that you've been hiding under been? It might be nice to hang out with, considering everything that's going on in the world. For those of you who don't know, Lele Pons was the most popular Viner on Vine when it shut down, and so thus that makes her a very popular figure on YouTube. She's also very widely criticized, and in my opinion, with good reason. Right as the world started to completely fall apart and go into quarantine, she stopped making sketch comedy videos, and after taking a short break, she released a docuseries entitled The Secret Life of Lele Pons, which seemingly was a direct response to much of the criticism she had been receiving. One of the things that makes this most likely is that the series most likely started filming right after something akin to a content cop came out on her, right by the channel Nerd City. If you need any more background on Lele Pons, I really suggest that you watch that video. I'll link it down in the description. This docuseries does seem to be mostly made to elicit sympathy from the viewer. Every single episode of this 5-part series seems to be entitled something that will elicit sympathy. Apart from episode 2, which is entitled My Dad is Gay, which in context of the rest of the episode titles is a little bit suspicious. The other big thing being that the ratings and comments for every single video are turned off, which is not exactly a great look when you're trying to deflect criticism. So I decided to watch the series to try and understand what it is that she was trying to accomplish with it, and trying to see if there are any valid points that she was making. And what I found was a very fascinating character study. This documentary does provide a lot of interesting insight into Lele Pons, although a lot of that insight mostly comes from subtext rather than what she directly tells you. One of the most obvious revelations to come out of this docuseries is the fact that Lele Pons does suffer from mental problems, most notably OCD. It does give a lot of insight into some of her actions, and it does give something of a context for how her life has turned out thus far. And this documentary does do the thing that apparently did set out to do. She talks about OCD and how she struggles with this condition and how she started getting into comedy to try and distract herself from this condition. One of the things that was interesting to note was that she does admit that one of her compulsions was obsessively comparing herself to other social media stars and influencers, particularly other women, in regards to body shape. I can see how that would obviously have an effect on your self-esteem. And the docuseries so far overall does make me feel sympathy for her. Until the second episode. When going into this docuseries, I did try my best to be completely neutral, because I obviously realized that if Lele was opening up about her OCD and other mental conditions she may have, I felt obligated to give her the due diligence to at least listen to what she was saying and try my best to be neutral about it. But with that in mind, this docuseries is extremely manipulative. Like I said, it does start off very well, with her first episode going into her struggles with OCD and how that has affected her life. After that, it seems she ran out of actual things to really talk about, because most of it is, shall we say, fluff. Take, for example, the aforementioned second episode, entitled My Dad is Gay.
Understand me, we live in a society. We live in a society.
Where do you get a mentally ill loner with a
For the first few minutes, she does talk about the fact that her father is in fact gay, and she mentions that that's the fact, and that's the reason that her mother and father split up. But then she spends the rest of the episode talking about her musical career and how much it means to her. And this is where the interesting, closer look into Lele's life started to seep through. As someone who does enjoy singing and enjoys music quite a bit, loving you, I will say that Lele Pons' music is serviceable. It's alright. It's not bad, it's not great, it's perfectly okay. And obviously it does seem like she has a lot of fun making that music, and that I totally can't fault her for. But when they start talking about her musical career, it becomes very clear that the people surrounding her are not the people who are going to be the harshest critics. Essentially, she's surrounding herself with yes men and women. Like, for example, a lot of people throughout the series, whenever they're talking about her artistic exploits, whether that be through music or through her comedy career in Vine, they often describe her as something like akin to the artistic coming of Christ. And as a lot of people can tell you, that's not really the best environment to create quality content. It doesn't help that this treatment seems to extend to YouTube itself, what with their constant artificial promotion of her videos on the trending page and their willingness to actually create this documentary for her. The most egregious example of this shows up in episode 4 entitled I Have Tourettes, wherein they talk about how the fact that Lele Pons does receive a lot of criticism is mostly a
consequence of this enormous talent to tell stories.
And also go on to imply that Lele Pons is incredibly original, while every one of her peers is incredibly unoriginal and copycats around her, and extends this insinuation to those criticizing her.
Most people can't do that. Most people are just copycats. Like, she can go into her zone and, like, think of something super unique.
And while I do agree that the commentary community is extremely unoriginal, myself included, I think it's very pretentious to say that you're the most original person in the room when that room is full of millions of people who are all trying their hardest to create amazing art. The other main observation I noticed throughout the first 3 episodes of this docuseries is that Lele is extremely dependent on the people around her.
I've told her many times, like, if you don't have your mom, then I don't even know if you could live. Because, like, there's a lot of things that she just doesn't even know how to do because her mom did it for her. The girl doesn't even have a wallet.
Now, she tries to say that this is mostly due to her condition of obsessive-compulsive disorder. I think that it's more likely that that's just the seed for a much larger, more preventable problem. Because of Lele's condition, it seems that the people around her are much more willing to go easy on her and not be critical of her and not, you know, force her to do her own laundry or make her own bed or make her own food or even have her own wallet. And thus Lele acts more irresponsibly, and they continue that cycle until they end up with someone who's extremely irresponsible and with quite a large ego. I think that this explains a lot about Lele, and it's probably the root cause for much of her more distasteful behavior, which Nerd City goes into a lot more. Again, video will be linked in the description. But that's essentially the first 3 episodes. Now, I think that the 4th episode is probably the most interesting and the most relevant to the discussion of criticism. The episode is aptly titled, The Internet Hates Me. Much like the previous 2 episodes, half of this episode is fluff, mostly talking about Lele Pons' music career a bit more and talking about the charity event that she did to help raise funds for Venezuela. Now, this is an interesting case because I do understand where Lele is coming from. Lele was born in Venezuela, and so thus seems to have an emotional connection to it. And so from that standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for her to want to perform at a charity event to help her country. But I don't think that she realized that, based on the reputation that she holds on the internet community, performing at a charity event while not taking a public stance beforehand on social media about the event does make it seem rather disingenuous. And while I don't particularly agree, I can understand where people are coming from. But Lele tries to turn it into haters are going to hate no matter what, and that seems to be the theme of how she views internet criticism. And it's really kind of distasteful, in my opinion, that she turns what was supposed to be an event about charity into a pity party for herself after talking about the criticism she received. She shows hate comments that she gets on her YouTube channel, which I sympathize with. Unfortunately, the internet is incredibly stupid and mean. There are always going to be people who are incredibly toxic to others that they dislike, and that is just an unfortunate truth about the internet and the world. But the problem comes when she starts pairing up those hate trolling comments with actual criticism, which you saw within the documentary. And so it's clearly more of a pity play by only showing the example of her doing something that seems genuinely good and being criticized for that, as opposed to all the other times that she's done terrible things and be criticized for that. Example, one of the most common criticisms that, when it specifically comes to Lele's comedy, is that one of the punchlines in a lot of her jokes is that she says that she's Latina. And she says, oh, I'm Latina. That'll be the joke. It's like, oh, why did you do this wacky thing? Oh, I'm Latina. Ha ha ha. And it's comes to the point where she actually starts using it as an excuse for things in real life. And so thus people have criticized her for saying, oh, I'm Latina, that's the punchline of the joke, and have called it annoying, which I also find annoying when you repeat something that isn't funny as a joke. She tries to turn it into a case of people are criticizing me for being proud of the fact that I'm Latina, which I think is a very poor representation of what people are thinking. If someone is proud of something, they're not going to make a mockery out of it. For example, I have friends who are members of the LGBT community, and they celebrate Pride Month. And I have a friend in particular who is very prideful about the fact that he is gay. The difference is that between him and what Lele is doing is that when he shows his pride, he says, I am proud to be this thing, and I don't care what anyone thinks about that. He does not turn it into a series of borderline homophobic jokes directed at himself. That's the criticism here. The thing that really disgusts me about this is that she continues to use all of this as a pure pity play. And I get that she may be a little bit soft to criticism because of the previously discussed yes men, but you can't expect to be large on the internet and not get some amount of hate. And so when you start breaking down from these in front of the camera, it's very much seems like a pity play because she's been on the internet for years, and if she's still this upset about stuff, then it seems like she probably has something else going on besides obsessive compulsive disorder. Another pity play that comes up is that when she receives criticism, her mild Tourette symptoms, or tics, become a lot more prominent. I don't know, I just think it's really manipulative to mention the fact that any kind of criticism will trigger a mental tic, which it's not the fault of the critic. Again, I am not a mental health professional, so anything I am saying is purely speculatory, but if you know more about this topic, please do feel free to let me know down in the comments below. And so thus I think we should move on to episode 5, entitled I'm My Own Worst Enemy. The bulk of this is mostly her talking to her celebrity guest for the show, which is the voice actor Howie Mandel. I really enjoyed Howie's section because it seemed like he was actually talking from the heart and not talking about the topics that Lele had chosen for everyone else to talk about in the previous episodes. He's talked about his own personal struggles with obsessive compulsive disorder and how he views how people should know it. One of the things that stuck out to me the most is that he said that people don't have to understand every little facet of obsessive compulsive disorder. They just have to understand that you're hurting. I just think it's good advice. And I think this is advice that Lele should have taken with this documentary, because if she goes to try and over-explain her condition and try to explain how hard it is for her and how hard everything is, it just comes off as fishing for sympathy. And that's my main problem with this whole series, is that for the most part, it's just fishing for sympathy. I would be totally on board if she was trying to make a documentary genuinely about her struggles, but if she wanted to do that, she would have just released the first episode. The rest of the documentary is just deflecting criticism, bragging about your own personal career, and giving it more reasons for people to have pity for you. When I saw the fact that Lele Pons actually has an executive producer's credit for this, it made a lot more sense, because in case you don't know, an executive producer is someone who has a lot of power over the end product of a production. Like a director obviously has the most power, but an executive producer can come in at any time and tell the director or the editor to remove something or add something else or make it seem more like this. And so it concerns me that so much of it is focused on Lele's either massive talent or her struggles with mental health and with intense hate on the internet. You can't go for the sympathy play and expect it to work if you've done things like attempt to sabotage your own best friend's career, constantly advertise to children unsolicited, and write a book that is incredibly toxic for your young, mostly female audience. There's a reason that almost all of YouTube that is above a certain age dislikes you, Lele. And it's not because you're popular and you're more talented than them. Well, I think that's probably going to do it for this video. I'm sorry that it was a bit more serious than the other ones, but I do feel like this was a topic that needed to be approached more seriously than with a comedic angle. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I sincerely hope that it did make your day just that little bit better. Let me know down in the comments below if there are any other movies or topics or anything that you want me to talk about. Feel free to follow me on Instagram at TSTTom, or check out my podcast. Links to all of that will be in the description below. Don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. It really helps my channel continue to grow. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye.